Interested how we learn? Well, then come on board with us as we embark on the journey discovering the fascinating world of learning with our new podcast series. Talking to leaders in the field, we will try to unravel the secrets behind this fundamental human process. In our debut episode with neuroscientist Dr. Dominik Rus, we spent some time talking about myths of learning, or simply put, what learning is and what is not. In today's episode, we asked Dominic to help us unpack experiential learning. Is it just a buzz or something that brings value to the learning process? As usual, when you have a good speaker, you go a bit off topic. So we also touch upon curiosity and emotions and what role they play in the learning process. Without any further ado, let's ask our expert. So Don, we briefly discuss about the experience, about the learning, and we put it together as an experiential learning as well. So if we circle back to that, what would you say are key benefits of this kind of approach? So key benefits of the experiential learning.
Yeah, so we need to tease, these two apart. Learning experience is one thing. We've talked a lot about this. And then experiential learning is really an approach, a theory, if you will, that comes from the 70s, from Kolb and his colleagues, his collaborators. But it really goes back to the ancient Greeks and Romans, right? They always believed in this experiential learning, right? So it's really not, a new kid on the block, but as a formal theory, packaged up as a formal theory, it appears in the 70s. So let's unpack experiential learning. Experiential learning emphasizes what we call direct experience and active engagement as a means of acquiring knowledge, developing skills, and at the end of the day, fostering personal growth, I would say. There's different premises, and the most important one is at the heart of experiential learning is the so-called learning by doing, right? And I mentioned this before when I mentioned how to learn, learning how to operate a machine, learning how to operate, navigate through a piece of software, learning how to use a bike. And it doesn't need to be
learning how to fly.
Learning how to fly, yeah, in our industry. It doesn't need to be something technical. It could be learning how to talk to people, how to network with people, how to be a leader, and all these different skills under leadership and managing, right? But again, at the heart of experiential learning is learning by doing. And experiential learning focuses on engaging learners and this hands-on experience and real-world activities, if you will, right? Instead of relying solely on theoretical knowledge through PowerPoints, self-paced learning courses, instead of this passive learning, we're talking about active learning. You've probably heard of that before. Active learning is really this type of experiential learning. So learners are actively participating in the activities, right? That's at the heart of experiential learning. And then part of Kolb's process was reflection. So I go through this experience, I reflect upon that, I actively engage in that, and then I contextualize this. He calls it contextualizing learning. I contextualize this for my situation, for my position, for my department, for my role. And then a big part of that cycle was feedback, or is, I should say, feedback and evaluation. And I always say we need to close that practice feedback loop. So I learn about something, I'm actively engaged in that, I practice it, I get feedback, and then I go back to practice and I close that practice feedback loop. That's what experiential learning is, really.
So very well explained. And Dom, usually, at least also in IATA, when we talk about experiential learning, we have quite a few different softwares that we use, but it's really related to building technical skills. They obviously have sometimes kind of a sub-objective, which is also to improve the communication skills, collaboration between different teams. But would you say that the experiential learning can equally be applied for those technical domains as well as for the, let's say, soft skills and building some leadership and managerial capabilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. And like a lot of people think that when you think about experiential learning, you're immediately thinking about hard skills, right? Operating a machine, riding a bike, operating, navigating through a piece of software, flying an airplane, whatever. But let's not forget, again, I'm going back to the ancient Greeks. They taught anything from how to be a speaker, how to be a great presenter, And mentoring is a huge part of it. Mentoring has always played a huge part of experiential learning. What's really cool about this, the rise of technology, Ivica, especially like the language models, you can replace the mentor and the coach with these technologies now, but you're not shying away from feedback and mentoring. You still have that built in, right? It's still part of the experiential learning, but you can achieve a lot through technology. So you don't need to go out to the field and play with aircraft and play with machines and bikes or whatever. You can simulate that in these beautiful simulators that we have now, right? Think about practice. I always say practice could be looked at different levels. You can have a low level, low touch practice, like maybe a low level simulator, maybe a gamified assessment tool that would, kind of conjure up that practice. And then maybe you can go up a notch to the next level, maybe a full-blown sandbox, a full-blown simulator that could teach anything from financial analysis to how to fly up. In fact, most of learning for pilots is through e-learning today, right? It's not really on the field. Yes, they do have, on the field practice, hands-on practice, learning by doing, but they do a lot of stuff through simulated practice, right? And again, you can simulate these managerial skills that you mentioned, right? And kind of teach and practice and give feedback on these different behaviors, like public speaking, or even like technical things about management, like doing performance management with your team. You can definitely do that. And the software is becoming more and more effective and more efficient. The price has been going down, especially now with the rise of generative AI. You can totally do that. For example, in my role in my current company, we simulate conversations with the customers using ChatGPT. You can say to ChatGPT, I'm going to be an agent, you're going to be a customer, play a customer, I'm going to play an agent, and let's simulate conversation XYZ. And it does such a good job. And it's a lot of soft skills. A lot of our clients are asking us for empathy. They want agents who are empathetic, not just agents who know the processes and the procedures and the tools. So you can embed that. You can say, this is the situation. Let's practice a conversation. And ChatGPT will do this perfectly. So yeah, it's not just hard skills. It's also softer skills. And I call them power skills or human skills. You can definitely do that. And you don't need to go to the field and do learning by doing with airplanes and machines and software. You can create simulations for that. And technology is getting better and better at this. And I think I can't wait to see where we are in terms of simulations, like these sandboxes and simulated learning 5 years from now.
Same here, Dom. Those were very good examples. I don't want to go more into details about Chat GPT because I think now it's so kind of intrigued that we should probably dedicate one episode just on the technology and chat and how we can actually use it in learning and development environment, because I'm very interested in that topic, but I think it requires a little bit more time to discuss what is the background and how we can actually use it. But what happens when we have, for example, training that people need to take because, let's say, it's a compliance related, but they have absolutely no motivation for that. Is there like any way how we can design it, in a way to basically create and stimulate that emotion, even if they come angry and grumpy and they don't really want to be there, but still, is there kind of a way that we can, play a little bit with that experience, touch the emotions so that they, at the end of the day, or maybe at the beginning of the session, immediately they say, okay, maybe I want to give it a try. Maybe I'm going to actually pay attention and I'm going to get something out of that.
Yeah, that's a great question. The compliance courses like checking the box kind of thing. Let me tell you, because you're gonna appreciate that because you come from you work for IATA, so you've seen probably a lot of boring compliance courses. Not that you guys are developing those, but most airlines do. Let's be honest, right? Let's take something like emergency response or maybe a bomb threat, like something that we all had to go through. I used to work in the aviation sector, so imagine an e-learning course that just talks about the process and you just go on and on, like flipping through the pages. Again, going back to this hitting the space button kind of e-learning course versus something that kind of evokes these positive emotions. Like one of our e-learning courses, the bomb threat, like opened up with like, I've placed a bomb on Copa's flight 235 to Chicago. It's going to explode in 1 hour, right? And imagine this versus today, we're going to teach you about how to respond to a bomb threat. Welcome. And then we present the objectives, right? So what we're doing is we're immediately creating these positive emotions because people get curious, people get interested in that. We have this, we call this attention grabbing technique, right? So this is how you create emotion, and you can definitely create these positive emotions with compliance courses. Tell the audience, draw them in. Tell them why this is important for them. Open it up with like some kind of attention grabbing technique. And here I always cite the AGES model that comes from the Neuroleadership Institute and in partnership with NYU, with New York University. And they've summarized all the evidence that there was about learning science. They've summarized it in this acronym called AGES. It's very pedagogical, very easy to digest, easy to cook, easy to eat, right? A stands for attention, G stands for generation, E stands for emotions, S stands for spacing. So imagine how we can apply this to these boring compliance courses. You just heard me say, you just heard an example of how we can open an e-learning course. That's attention right there. That's the A. Grab the audience's attention immediately. Throw a story, an anecdote, an example, a thought-provoking image. Even if it's a compliance-based course, you can totally do that. You do that for emergency-related courses, for what are the other courses, like security courses, ethics courses. They could be so boring, but when you give the audiences a real-life example, something that they would appreciate, something they can relate to, something that is attention-grabbing, you have that A. You've satisfied that A in AGES. G stands for generation. Don't give them don't ask them to flip through the pages. Ask them to generate their thoughts. So instead of giving them like these weird, boring, ineffective multiple choice questions, ask them a thought-provoking question that taps into problem solving. So ask, instead of saying, Ivica, what's the right answer? And the 4 choices, ask them, how would you deal with ABC? How would you approach ABC? And ask them, give them an open-ended question. Again, you're tapping into generation because they're generating thoughts, right? What's even better than that? Ask them to share their thoughts, whether it's in a face-to-face environment or in the LMS or LXP. Ask them to share their thoughts about a process. Like you just heard about a bomb threat. How would you react to this? Share with your fellow learners. So you're, again, tapping into this social collaborative learning and making them generate their thoughts. E is for emotions. How do you evoke these positive emotions that yield, better attention, better memory, and motivation that we talked about a few minutes ago? And then S is for spacing. Space it out. These, we've known for decades and decades that learning is not an event; it's a process. Why do we still put together these 20, 30, 40-minute e-learning courses is just beyond me. If you want to teach something and make sure that people change their behaviors, don't give them a 20-minute e-learning course, check the box and say you've done it. If it's a compliance course, yeah, you might want to give them a little pre-work. Maybe you want to give them a 20-minute e-learning course, and then maybe, 7 days after, you want to give them a real life scenario and they need to respond to that. And maybe three weeks later, you might want to give them another scenario and maybe you want to ask them to share with your fellow learners or with their boss something that they've learned from that course. You need to create a process, right? Learning is a long tail process. It's not an event. Yet a lot of us in learning and development, a lot of L&D professionals still kind of think that they're going to change people's behaviors through a 20-minute e-learning course. It just doesn't work that way, right? So yes, compliance courses can be fun. They can be enjoyable. If you go with something like the AGES model, it could totally work, but you need to do the pre, the during, and the after. You need to turn that 20-minute compliance scores into a process, especially if you want to change people's minds, people's mindset, and people's behaviors about a process. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Could we say that if we have this practical component, in the experiential learning, that can sort of replace the quizzing because you're asked to do something, therefore you have to recall and apply? I'm just curious.
I've heard this all the time, and the short answer is no, but let me tell you why. Because people always frown upon quizzing and memorization because they feel this is like a low level kind of learning. Even if you go with like Bloom's taxonomy, research has shown it's really kind of devoid of practice and practical application. And there's there's different types of research that has shown that it's completely wrong from the psychological perspective, neurological perspective, etc. But let's take something like Bloom's taxonomy. Where is memorization? Memorization is on the bottom, right? And it's been always frowned upon, especially with the rise of like these technologies like Google, and the web browsers, and now generative AI. And people would say, no, we want to tap into problem solving, like those high level problem solve. But how can you problem solve, Ivica? How can you compare and contrast two theories, two approaches if you don't know about them, right? So Bloom was right in one sense. You need that lower level knowledge to be able to get to some higher level knowledge, right? Especially the memorization piece, right? So you can't just go and practice without knowing what it is. Someone needs to tell you, this is a bike, this is how it works, right? And then you might practice. Can you combine the two? Absolutely. But you can't just practice without having like that lower level knowledge, right? So I hope that answers your question, right? So it's frowned upon for no good reason. We need that lower level knowledge.
It absolutely does.
So what do you need from a very well put together learning program that would evoke these positive emotions? When you evoke positive emotions, you basically evoke three things: attention, memory, and motivation, right? Why do people love going to these concerts? Why do they love going to a theater or to the movies? Or why do they love traveling, right? Because it evokes positive emotions. When you evoke positive emotions, such as enjoyment, excitement, and curiosity, there's so much work now going on around curiosity. When people become curious, when they're excited about something, when they are enjoying it, you boost attention, memory, and motivation. And as you know, these are prerequisites for learning, right? Without attention, focusing attention on what you're trying to learn, without boosting that long-term memory that we talked about a few minutes ago, and without motivation, this intrinsic motivation, right? You don't get learning. So these are prerequisites for learning: attention, memory, motivation. And research shows that when you evoke these positive emotions, you boost attention, memory, and motivation, and by extension, learning. But research has also shown, Ivica, that when learners or people are anxious, stressed out, or when you're evoking these negative emotions, right, like stress, anxiety, fear, for example, you get the opposite effect. Your attention goes down. You kind block that memory. You're preventing your short-term memory to go into long-term memory, and your motivation, your intrinsic motivation, goes down. So what do you get with less attention, less memory, and less motivation? Well, you get less learning, right? Worse learning and less learning. That's why emotions are so important, and specifically positive emotions. And I mentioned curiosity. I want to tell you that because this, again, the learning science that most L&D professionals don't know about. When we get excited and we are curious about something, you've heard of, this term has been around since the 70s. You've heard of the zone, or, we evoke this flow. When you fall into that flow state, when you're in that zone, this is the optimal environment for learning. And there's so much research about this now, even from the neurological perspective, when people are looking at the brain waves and they're saying, so what's this optimal state when we get these positive emotions to flourish and the brain waves get into that zone level, right? That zone, that flow, right? And it seems that it's, I don't want to get too technical, but it's like between delta and theta brain waves, which is sort of something between deep sleep and sort of like relaxed state, almost like a meditative state. When you fall
No,
into that and you're learning, it looks like that your learning goes up. And again, it goes back to positive emotions, especially curiosity.
yeah, no, a lot of great information. So maybe if I can just like circle back to a few of them,
Yeah.
because I think it's important. So I like the way you explain the motivation, and I think it really helps when people are motivated, let's say, to go for specific training and learn. It's kind of then easy to get them on board for the learning process.